So, two things stood out to me as I was listening to you. One of them was Halloween was Friday. I know this is a strange comment, but a number of years ago, probably the most popular interview I ever did was with an exorcist, Father Stephen Rossetti, who I was sitting next to at the Knights of Columbus convention a couple of months ago. And I asked him, what is hell? And he said, it's having no friends. And there are men in our country who have no friends, apparently, which sounds like hell. The other thing that you said was not feeling loved. Patrick Kelly also, and this is not a Catholic event, but bear with me. Patrick Kelly is a great friend of the Sisters of Life. They're Catholic nuns. And one of the things that I've learned from them is how many people have never had a birthday celebrated. They are like awesome celebrating your birthday. I've had it happen, maybe you have. But if no one has ever celebrated your life, that sounds like hell. I'm so grateful to Ellen, for the Lafayette group, for everyone who's here, everyone who's watching. We have a great panel, and we want to get to practical results. So first, we have Cole Lyle, and I'm Kathryn Lopez from the National Review Institute. I didn't say that, and National Review Magazine. But I'm so excited about the other people we have here. Cole Lyle is a Marine veteran who has seen the ravages of war like few others, but also community. He was telling me earlier. Dr. Sally Satel is a scholar at the American Enterprise Institute and a practicing psychiatrist who I've been blessed to know for a long time. And Dan Kain is at Brotherhood DMV. Community. This is what everyone needs, and certainly what men need. I think we're going to talk a little bit about friendship and relationship and the critical thirst for both. And I think we've seen that in the media recently in news events, and people are thirsting. So, Cole, can you start us off briefly from your vantage point? How do you respond to the poll results? And just from your experience, what are you seeing about young men and mental health, which is what our panel's about?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me. Cole Lyle with the American Legion. I run the National Healthcare and Benefits Division for the largest veteran service organization in the country. I've been doing veteran advocacy for about 10 years because of some of my own issues. This is deeply personal to me. As a young man growing up in a household with two older sisters and my mom, I was very hungry for male connection at a young age. My mom, recognizing that she couldn't also be a father, connected me in Boy Scouts. I played football growing up, and I got some of those strong male mentors that really changed the direction of my life. I ended up joining the Marine Corps out of high school. 80% of the military enlists out of high school, so we're dealing with the same age cohort here. The poll results weren't really surprising because we deal with a lot of the same issues when veterans get out of the military, which is why we see the most vulnerable point in a veteran's life is the first year that they transition. Because unlike most young American men, when somebody enlists, they have a built-in support system, connection. We jokingly refer to it as camaraderie through mutual suffering. You are more or less bonded with these people from all walks of life, all backgrounds, and trained to accomplish a mission despite any differences that you may have. When you leave, that stuff gets kind of ripped away from you pretty quickly, and you have to find your purpose again. We've talked a lot about purpose, we've talked a lot about meaning. And that ultimately is what I think young American men really seek and want. They find it in the military, and then when they leave, they have to find that again, either in their family, their community, or indeed the country again, right? And the studies, the American public has kind of a skewed perspective on what the veteran population deals with, largely because of movies and what they consume. I think 80% of military veterans have an immediate family member that served, so military service has become a family business, and the American public has not a great perspective on what they deal with. 11 to 30% of global war on terror veterans have dealt with some sort of mental health challenge. Again, first year, most vulnerable, but what we see is if you give these veterans tools to thrive and overcome their issues, veterans donate their time at a higher rate than non-veteran young men. They donate their money to nonprofit causes. They contribute $1 trillion to the American economy in entrepreneurship. So you see a lot of great success stories when you give young men the tools to thrive, when you give them that community, when you give them the resources that they can then build on after they serve in the military. So, we're talking about this issue with young American men and how to get them connected into different organizations to help them thrive. But when they are dealing with struggles, part of what I do on a day-to-day basis is work with Congress, the VA, and the White House on policies that the government can promote or institute to try to help these veterans thrive. And I think some of that could be applicable to young American men.
Thank you so much, Cole. Dan Kain, could you respond to the poll results?
Sure thing. Thank you. And this is the first time that I've been a part of any type of panel or project or conversation like this. So I'm deeply grateful to be here, and thank you for giving me the platform. So for the last year and change, I founded a grassroots community effort called Brotherhood DMV. We're locally based in Arlington, Virginia, where I've resided for the last 6 years, but we really plan community-based activities and outings for men to come together to be able to create more of a childhood-like sense of camaraderie, right? I think for any men that are in the room, you can think back to when you were young. How did you make friends, right? It was doing things that you enjoyed with other men, maybe in your neighborhood. You connected through family, but there's a sense of common values or common interests, right, that you typically bonded with other men because of. And Brotherhood DMV kind of lies at the root of that. It was born out of really a desire, a need for myself to find that type of community. I fortunately, growing up in Pennsylvania, had the predisposition to have a lot of male friends. I was an only child, and similar to Cole, had always kind of yearned for that type of brotherhood and friendship in my life at a young age, and was fortunate enough to create a lot of strong bonds with men throughout the years. And I think one thing that I found from kind of the grassroots community sense is everything that we saw in the poll, to agree with Cole, did not surprise me. I also think I may be correct in saying this. I might be the youngest person speaking today, so probably the closest to the age range of the men that were polled. 33 years old, so I have 12 years of experience very recently being a part of that group of men that were polled, and I have lived on both sides of that spectrum, candidly. I have been the young man that has been a part of groups and had very close friendships and mentorships and networks, and have been athletic in fitness my entire life. I've also been on the other side of the spectrum, where I've felt like I've fallen victim to the online communities, gaming when I was younger, and these types of activities that challenge men from being contributing members of society, right, and being able to find meaning and find purpose. And I felt that myself at certain points, really within the last 5 or 6 years. It's not a far cry to say that, pre-COVID, during COVID, post-COVID, I definitely fell into a depression, felt a sense of loneliness. And that was kind of the impetus for Brotherhood DMV, and how it began was truly this need for myself to find male mentorship. And to find an uplifting and supportive community of men that supported other men's personal development and growth in life. And that is seemingly hard to find today, right? When we look at, these demographics of young men, we also look at the elder demographics, right? One of my good friends is in the crowd right now, Amadeus. He began a podcast that speaks to this idea of male vacancy, there being a vacancy of elders in society. So we're talking about the older generations, Generation X and baby boomers, that now, as well as millennials, I'm on the younger side of millennials, but have this responsibility to be elders in society, right? And to lift young men up, to inspire young men to search for community, as Mr. Kelly said earlier this morning. It's kind of what we're building within Brotherhood DMV is a localized sense of core, as you spoke about, the ability to provide a platform for men to come together. Typically, it's around fitness and exercise. So we saw the numbers earlier, right? I've been someone that has been in the fitness world my entire life as a young athlete, but more recently as a coach and a personal trainer. And I find that health being the foundation with which our lives are built, period. That applies to everybody, not just men. When you allow access to a community-based activity around exercise or health in some sort, you see men become more engaged and more willing to look at the other aspects and areas of their life and want to grow in those areas as well. When you're able to see, hey, if I put time and energy into something like exercise, right? Something as simple as I can go from point A to point B in a few weeks and feel better, that applies to the rest of their life. So I think there's a lot that can be extrapolated from this information. It was not surprising, but it's all of the things that we try to address within the Brotherhood DMV community.
Thank you so much. This, again, might be a little silly comment, but I think it's so important. For many years, sitcoms always have the dad as like a doofus. And I think one of the reasons this gathering is so important is because we need men, we need fathers, and you actually matter, you know. Patrick Kelly and I have a mutual friend who died a number of years ago, and I had never heard I hope she's not watching this, his wife swear. But she, maybe a year after he died, said, single parenthood is so effing wrong. And her point was not to judge anyone or anything like that. The story was she took her little kids, 7 and under, 4 of them, to an amusement park. And Frederick wanted to go on a roller coaster, like a baby roller coaster. And at the last minute, he chickened out. And I hope Frederick's not watching this. And so on the car ride home, he starts crying. And he says, I wanted to go on the roller coaster. And Maureen says, but you said you didn't want to go on the roller coaster. And Frederick said, Dada would have made me. Men and women are different, and we need you. A number of years ago, Pope Benedict, again, not a Catholic event, but we'll downplay the Catholicism later, but religion is obviously important, right? In 2012, Pope Benedict handed me a letter to all the women in the world, and one of the lines in this message is, it is up to women to save the peace of the world. And we need men who believe that and who can work together. And so I wanted to say that before we had the woman on the panel speak. So Sally Satel, what is your response after all your experience with working with men to these poll results?
Oh, well, not really surprised. I mean, with all due respect, this poll follows in a tradition of so many that have shown lots of the same results. But one finding that is interesting is that men who are doing well still spend a lot of time online. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. You can do constructive things online for sure. But it shows how important context is. So someone can have, and engage in one behavior that some might question or worry might, be somehow unhealthy. But if they're surrounded, if it's in the context of other healthy pursuits, then it's not nearly as damaging. Those buffers are incredibly important. Well, you know, I am a psychiatrist, but honestly, I think my role today is to say that all of the problems that have been discussed so far and probably will be discussed later in the day are not clinical problems. They're not pathology. They're existential problems. And I've made a kind of a long career of trying to caution against medicalizing aspects of life. Now, certainly there are real problems. I mean, some people do have significant anxiety, significant depression, significant ADHD that is not kind of an artifact of being in an environment that doesn't really accommodate the style of young men. And there's medication. I'm not against meds. Actually work in a methadone clinic, and that's where I actually see some of the young men. So these are a subpopulation that is clearly very unhappy in their life, and hopefully we're helping them. But again, while I certainly acknowledge there are real, some people have real problems that have to be dealt with in a clinical setting, that most of this is not that. This is psychological. And so I guess I should say that for that small minority of people who probably do need professional help, that's a challenge for young men. And men in general, actually. A lot of folks tend to see the idea of of even approaching a therapist as some sort of sign of, weakness, that sort of help-seeking. It's a vulnerability that they don't feel comfortable with at all. Self-disclosure, emotional, expression of emotions does not come naturally to a lot of young men. And there is there's a fine line between how do you fulfill your idea of being a masculine ideal and still making yourself vulnerable. And everyone has a different approach to that, for sure. And to add to that is that most of the overwhelming number of therapists, and I'm talking about counselors and social workers and psychologists, are women. And I know a lot of them. I am one, and I know we can do a good job, but again, for a young man who's already reluctant to be in a milieu that prizes disclosure, in some cases it's even more aversive to do it in front of a woman. So we don't have enough male therapists, probably don't have enough therapists in general, but there aren't enough men in these fields, so that's one problem. But I'll just finish up by saying that a lot can be done even in non-traditional therapeutic settings, even though they're geared towards therapeutic change, which is to have groups of men. Those men tend to, or young boys tend to like to be in groups as opposed to individual therapy. Obviously, I'm generalizing. Some men would love to have their own therapist and be on a couch in Freudian therapy, but that's not, again, the typical person we're talking about here. They like to emphasize problem solving, self-reliance, things that are task-oriented, and kind of framing stoicism in a healthy way, which is to say, the mirror image of what in 2018, you may recall, the American Psychological Association had a guideline for men and boys, and they kind of scoffed at, I'm quoting them, traditional masculinity that was marked by, again, quoting, stoicism, competitiveness, dominance, and aggression. And there is such a thing as healthy aggression. Of course, there's something as unhealthy aggression, and no one, of course, is endorsing that. But there are ways to reframe all those features in very healthy ways, and that will benefit men and women. And healthy men is also good for healthy women.
Well, so if you don't mind, Sally, because you're the medical doctor on the panel, this point, we had a conversation last week, the panel, and one of your concerns, and both Dan and Cole echoed this, was this idea that we're overly medicating, overly pathologizing, but again, you're not against medication, people need medication, but how do we deal with that? And I think back to some of your writing where, 20 years ago, we were basically medicating boys for being boys, right? The aggression, running around, and we want them to do that. So how do we balance that? And for Dan and Cole too, I mean, you work in civil society, and I think that's key to how we solve this problem. So yeah, how do we balance that, Sally?
Well, okay, not to be too flip, but I think the first answer is don't send them to a psychiatrist. Don't send them to someone in the
Says the psychiatrist.
in the mental health world, because that becomes the framing for what they're dealing with and what the solution will look like. And then healthy outlets, which you guys are experts in, and in school, a lot more recess, for sure. And, I think those kinds of things, they're not the only three, of course, but I think they can go, quite a long way. A lot of it has to do with, again, kind of the framing of the problem. And in general, I don't think it's healthy to frame it in clinical terms or with clinical personnel.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree. I think the worst problem that we have in the veteran community, the data, which could be wrong, suggests that 17 and a half veterans take their lives every day, which amounts to roughly 6,200 and something. And that's a tragedy. It's urgent. I've been banging this drum for 10 years that we view that problem through the lens of mental health, which seems intuitive. But 9 times out of 10, it's not a mental health problem. It's a conglomeration of relationship stress, acute financial stress, unemployment, transportation issues, any number of things. It's part of the human condition. Yeah. So teach these young men to be resilient, and that's where mentors really help to come into play. And that's why the American Legion and other organizations really rely on service, getting these young men into community service projects around other men that can be a resource. They build that trust, they build the relationship, and then when they have one of these issues upstream before they get to that critical mass of despair, they say, hey, I've got somebody I could reach out to, and maybe they don't have the answer, but they know somebody that has the answer, and they can plug them into a local resource that's trusted. But, at the end of the day, if they do need, I've been on the receiving end of more suicidal calls than I care to remember, and to a person, every single one of them boils down to, I feel unloved and useless. And so it's about saying, hey, I do care about you, right? I want you to stay here. You have enormous potential in your future with your family, with your career, whatever. But if you do need mental health help, part of it is breaking the stigma. And it's our responsibility as kind of the elder cohort of our generation to tell these men. And from a military perspective, I talk to veterans all the time and I say, look, how many hours did we spend trying to make sure that our very basic weapon system, the M4, the M16, didn't jam? We did a lot of preventative maintenance, and then when it jammed, we were drilled on immediate action to get the gun up and to get back on mission. Why would you feel ashamed of taking preventative action or immediate action on the most complicated supercomputer in the world, which is your mind? So if you're having one of those issues, take care of it. There's no shame in that. But again, take care of those upstream factors before you even need to get to that point.
And isn't part of it too just appreciating that life has suffering and actually admitting that and having, that's key part of the mentorship, right? Yeah. To have somebody accompanying you.
Yeah, and that's why, I personally have a couple of mentors that whenever I'm going through something or I'm on the horns of a dilemma, major decision or something, I talk to each of them and they know me, they know my goals, they know my past, and so they can help me talk through that decision. And what usually happens is, most of the time unanimously, but 75% of them say you should make this choice. So it provides what I call decision leverage. So it takes kind of that out of my hands to say, these people know me, they want what's best for me, and they provide that insight, right? A lot of young men that don't have that they're trying to make it up as they go and deal with these problems in a way that they're not equipped to do so. So it's incredibly important to surround yourself with those people, but it's like, how do we get these young men offline and into those communities? You know, when we were growing up, we had online relationships, but they were oftentimes rooted in real relationships. Mm-hmm. You know, I played multiplayer Halo, right? But it was like with kids down the street that I went to school with and had relationships with. How do we get this young generation of men that are on YouTube for 6+ hours a day to plug into a local community and provide those mentorships and those relationships?
Can I add on to that?
Please.
To somewhat answer your question, Cole, I think a big thing that we're talking about here, and to pull on a thread that you mentioned and Sally mentioned, is leading by example, right? How do we get younger men out of the house, you know, into their communities, whether that means playing with their friends, right? It means not imparting fear that your neighbor is your enemy, right? There's a lot of kind of community-based and societally based fear that has been, you know, just cultivated over years of believing that, you know, when we were younger and, you know, played football in high school, you would go door to door and try to sell candy bars, right? I highly doubt that happens anymore. You know, we're in a generation now where there's a lot of, you know, trunk or treating because we don't want kids going next door to see their neighbors. And I understand that, you know, there is an element of truth to, you know, what is happening in society. But to come back, I think leading by example is a major way we inspire the younger generation to have more self-awareness. I think, Kathryn, you mentioned, you know, yes, realizing that there are struggles in life and you will go through struggles, you will go through, you know, dark phases and challenging phases. It takes self-awareness, or it takes a mentor or someone to be able to guide you through that thought process. When you're 16, you're not the most self-aware human being, and knowing that the things that you are struggling with are common, right?
It's probably the understatement of our lifetimes, which we don't say enough, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So leading by example is incredibly important. I think one thing that Sally mentioned I wanted to pull as well is that when you are young, and I can speak to my own experiences, a non-family related male mentor in my life, I don't think I found until I was in the working world, so 25 or 26 years old. And somebody that I could go to with these larger life questions that oftentimes if you're a 16, 18, 20-year-old male, like, there's a lot that you're probably not going to your dad to ask about, right? You know, depending on that relationship, you know, you grow up and yes, your dad might be your hero if you have a father that's present in the household, but there's a lot of things that you probably are just trying to deal with internally because you're too scared or afraid to ask that older male mentor who might be familially related, right? So there's a lot of importance in finding that mentorship. And when you get to a point in life as a young man and you start to question, you know, what am I doing? What is my purpose? What are the things in my life or areas of my life maybe where I'm struggling and I don't feel like I'm going in the right direction? It is really hard to bring that to the surface and to speak that to anyone in your life. And I've experienced that firsthand. And I think that's where having a supportive community of men in the generations above you asking good questions. There's a void in our society today of not just men in society, but asking good questions to provoke good conversation, right? Healthy conversation. And I think that's what a lot of this is about. You're not going to have self-awareness unless somebody guides you through that process of, you know, showcasing or illuminating maybe your self-limiting behaviors or beliefs.
Yeah, and if I, real quick, the biggest thing, if any young man is watching right now, you know, I firmly believe, like, men want to lead, men want to serve, right? I jokingly, only half-jokingly say that the worst parts of my life are in the congressional record because I've testified about some of the issues I've dealt with as a veteran. And the amount of veterans, and not just veterans, but young men that have reached out and said, like, hey, I saw you talk about this. Like, I'm going through something similar. What's your advice, right? You'd be surprised how many older men will lean into that relationship if you simply ask. And you say, like, I'm struggling with this. I need some help. What do you think? And will be very candid and say, this is what I think based on what I know about you, limited information I have. But if it's a close relationship and it comes to that point where you're like, hey man, this is on you. I've given you all the advice I can give. It gives that person the comfort of knowing that somebody cared about them enough to offer advice, and then the decision's in their hands, and they can make that decision. So you're not abdicating the responsibilities that young men have to make decisions for their own life, but you're providing that mentorship and that feedback that they so desperately need, and frankly, older men desperately need, because we want to be mentors. We want to help young men. So the door's open. All you got to do is open it.
One of the things that both of you just said, I just think is so important. We don't focus enough on kids in foster care. And one of the issues is aging out of foster care, right? But it's not just kids who are in foster care who don't have an adult in their life, a man in their life, if they're a boy, to just say, what do I do in this situation? And it's so important, but we don't fully appreciate it. And I have to say, too, thank you for your congressional testimony. Just last night, I was reading a book that's coming out on infertility, and it took everything in this woman to write about her struggles with infertility. But it's so important because so many people are struggling and they think they're alone, and you're not alone. And again, thank you, Cole, for saying, if you're a man watching this, you're not alone. And yeah, so we don't have much time left. So I want to go, we'll start with Sally, just practical. How can we help? And appreciating, again, this balance, right? Some of it is mental illness, some of it is just lifestyle, which is not just, it's a huge thing. Yeah, what practical suggestions can we give people?
Well, I think we all kind of went through them in terms of, mentors and recess. And I'll throw out one that never comes up, but I think it's so important, is reading, is literacy. Because if people don't, I mean, women too, but obviously they do better in school at younger ages and throughout, apparently. They get most of the degrees. But if you aren't comfortable, are not going to, it's very unlikely you will succeed in the world of work. Even if your work is very much hands-on, you have to read instructions. That's really important. That's
Chat GPT is not going to fix that problem.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say from a corporate or an organizational perspective, one of the things that a lot of folks have found success in the veteran community is setting up veteran kind of organizations, working groups within their companies to provide that support structure with other veterans who have the same experiences with them. Because especially working age veterans, like you're going to go to work, and if you have a family, like I have a 2.5-year-old, I'm not going to stop somewhere between work and home to go hang out with people, right? So I'm fortunate enough to where I work around a lot of veterans, so I have that ability. But from a corporate perspective, that would be my advice. From a personal perspective, I'd say obviously reach out, again, find and develop mentors. And the thing that I don't think any of us have touched on at this point, but is very important, when you are struggling with something, alcohol is not the solution, right? Try to abstain to the extent possible personally when you're going through difficult
It will
times
just make it worse, even though you think it'll be better.
Increase your anxiety. It'll make it harder to make decisions that benefit you. So responsible alcohol use, of course, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but when you're going through difficult times, try to abstain.
I think I would say that it takes good men to step up and speak out for other men to follow suit. There's a noticeable trend, and I can speak specifically to my experience with Brotherhood DMV, that if you have an idea for a way to support a community of men or even one man in your life, speak up and provide that outlet. And I'm speaking to the women in the room and who are watching as well, is encourage men in your life to seek community, whatever that means. And even if you don't think they're struggling, I bet there is something they're struggling with that you just don't know about. So encourage men to seek community. I think one of the foundational elements of brotherhood is that we try to get together to support each other, and I try to provide the space for men to be comfortable opening up and kind of speaking about life. And we have men who are fathers, who are current, former military, who are single, who have gone through divorces, breakups, and all walks and stages of life. And coming together in an environment that encourages support, accountability, vulnerability, and really an integration of recognizing these struggles that you are going through in your life are common, that we all go through them together, I think is one of the most important things. So support the men in your life and their ability to grow and develop into better human beings.
I was just the other day involved in an event on anti-Semitism, and it reminded me of this great man, Cardinal O'Connor, who, I'm a New Yorker. He was the cardinal in New York, and he had insomnia, like really painful, awful insomnia his entire life. And what did he do to make it better, make use of it? So other bishops knew that they could call him at 3 o'clock in the morning when they were depressed and lonely and didn't know what to do and just had basic questions. And for his entire life, he made use of that insomnia. Two things. Our suffering can be used for good, but also just asking questions to people, just reaching out, like you were saying. Just making sure that people know they're not alone. It's just so important. It's so important. And yeah, I'm about to get the hand wave. Okay, one question. Yes.
Thank you all. I'm Isaac Bledsoe from the American Institute for Boys and Men. And I was interested in your thoughts around, so we're seeing these ways that boys are interacting online, spending lots of time on YouTube, disengaged from society, but boys didn't create YouTube. They didn't make the internet really addictive. So how do we talk about these things and encourage boys and men to pursue more pro-social behavior without blaming them for something that they genuinely didn't do or create?
They didn't start the fire.
Yeah, I would say the answer is, the data clearly suggests that the more you're online, it has an inverse relationship with mental health, with some successes in other areas of your life. So you don't have to blame them, empower them to say, look, if you want to fix some of these issues that you're dealing with, maybe try something different, right? The definition of insanity, we all know, is expecting a different result, doing the same thing over and over again. So if you're struggling and dealing with certain things and you're not, you don't think your life is headed where it should be headed and you have high online use, and I would say as parents, as adults, as mentors, try to give that message to young men before it becomes an issue and say, hey, and plug them in at an early age so they understand the value of mentorships and social connection.
Dan, did you want to add?
Yeah, one thing.
And then we'll give Sally the last word.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say a big part of that is exposure. And what I mean by that is, speaking from personal experience, the times in my life where I felt the most lonely or the most disconnected, the most isolated were the times when I lost my sense of connection to things that filled me up and brought me joy in life. And I think we have to acknowledge and understand that a lot of these young men do enjoy being online, right? And they enjoy playing video games, and that's not a bad thing, as Alex spoke to. It's how do we temper that faucet, right? So it's not drinking from a fire hose, you kind of dial it down a little bit. It's exposing them to maybe, or re-exposing them to things in their life that once brought them joy. And maybe that's exercise, maybe that's, going to amusement parks, it's, maybe it's finding themselves in nature. It's bringing them along, and if you're a parent or a sibling, encourage them, like I just said, to go out into the world and experience things again that maybe they once loved. For me, it was finding fitness again in my life. I had about 3 or 4 years of, not having this one thing that rooted me and grounded me throughout my entire childhood. And when I engaged with that activity, I found purpose in life again.
Sally?
I would just say, think of that to the extent that that use seems compulsive or destructive. Figure out really what it's a what it's a symptom of, and then address the underlying need, because all these, even self-destructive behaviors, fill at some point some function. So figure out what that function is.
Well, thank you, Cole, Lyle, Dan, Kain, and Sally Satel so much for being here, and thank you for everyone who's spending time here today.